The stranger at their campsite knew one of their names. The first thing that scared Chris wasn't the stranger, and it wasn't the knife. It wasn't the knife, and it wasn't the fact that they were miles from the nearest road. It was hearing the man say Brandon's name, because none of them had told him what it was. And by then, they had already made the mistake of letting him sit by their fire. Brandon, Chris, and Matt had been camping together for years. Not serious survivalists, not influencers trying to film every minute of the trip. Just three friends who liked getting away from people, away from phones, away from work, away from everything. The trip started exactly like most of their others. 3-day weekend, remote national forest, a spot they'd never visited before, but had researched ahead of time. There were no official campsites where they planned to stay. No hookups, no bathrooms, no crowds, just forest. Exactly how they liked it. The hike in took most of the afternoon. The deeper they went, the quieter things became. No traffic, no airplanes, nothing. Just wind, birds, their own footsteps. By sunset, they found a clearing near a creek. Flat ground, good visibility, enough firewood nearby. Perfect. They set up camp, cooked dinner, started a fire, and opened a few drinks. They settled into the kind of conversation that only happens around a campfire. Stories from high school, old girlfriends, bad decisions. The usual. Around 10 p.m., Brandon noticed something. Movement across the creek. At first, he thought it was an animal. Then the figure stepped into the firelight. A man, older, maybe late 60s, thin, dirty clothes, long gray beard, standing completely still, watching. The conversation immediately died. Nobody moved. The man smiled. Evening. His voice sounded normal, friendly even, but something felt wrong. The way he appeared, the way he stood there, the fact that nobody had heard him approach. Matt finally spoke. "How's it going?" The man smiled wider. "Better now." Something about that answer bothered Brandon immediately. The man crossed the creek slowly, not asking permission, not waiting, just approaching. Then he stopped near the edge of the camp. "You boys mind if I warm up for a bit?" The three friends exchanged looks. Nobody wanted to say yes, but nobody wanted to say no either. Eventually, Brandon nodded. "Sure." The man sat. For the first few minutes, everything seemed normal. He talked about fishing, the weather, the forest. Nothing unusual. Then the conversation shifted. The man started asking questions. Where they were from, how long they'd been camping, whether anyone knew exactly where they were. The last question made Chris uncomfortable. He laughed awkwardly. "Why?" The man shrugged. "No reason." Then smiled. Again. Always smiling too much. Brandon noticed something else. The man never answered questions about himself. Every time someone asked where he was staying, he changed the subject. Every time someone asked how long he'd been out there, he redirected the conversation. Eventually, Matt asked directly, "So where's your campsite?" The man looked toward the trees, then said, "Everywhere." Nobody laughed. The fire cracked loudly. The man looked into the flames, then quietly said, "The forest takes care of its own." A chill ran through Brandon, because the way he said it didn't sound like a joke. It sounded like belief. Real belief. After another 20 minutes, the man stood up. "Well," he smiled, "good meeting you boys." Then looked directly at Brandon. "And good seeing you again." Silence. Brandon frowned. "What?" The man kept smiling, then said, "Sleep well, Brandon. and walked into the darkness. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Chris turned immediately. "How the hell does he know your name?" Brandon stared toward the trees. "I didn't tell him." Nobody had. All three knew that. The rest of the night felt different. Nobody wanted to admit it, but they were all scared. Not panic, not yet. Just enough fear to keep looking into the darkness. Eventually, they went to sleep, or tried to. Around 2:30 a.m., Chris woke up. At first, he wasn't sure why. Then he heard it. Footsteps outside. Slow, circling. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. Not hiding, just walking. Chris listened. Then another sound. Metal, very faint, like someone lightly striking against something else. He sat up, and the footsteps stopped. Silence. Then came a voice outside the tent, soft, almost whispering. "Brandon." Chris froze instantly, because Brandon wasn't in that tent. He was sleeping 30 feet away. The voice came again. "Brandon." Chris grabbed his flashlight, turned it on. Nothing. The footsteps immediately retreated into the darkness. Fast. Chris burst out of the tent. Brandon and Matt emerged seconds later. "What happened?" Chris explained. Nobody went back to sleep. The three sat by the fire until sunrise. And that's when they noticed it. Near the edge of the camp, 3 small piles of rocks, one beside each tent, carefully stacked. Placed there during the night. Nobody had heard it happen, and nobody saw who did it. And sitting on top of Brandon's pile was a hunting knife. Old, rusty, but sharp. Matt immediately wanted to leave. Chris agreed, and Brandon didn't argue. They packed quickly, too quickly, and started hiking out. The forest felt different now. Every sound mattered. Every shadow looked suspicious. Nobody wanted to be there anymore. Around midday, Matt stopped suddenly. "What is that?" Up ahead, tied to a tree, was a strip of cloth. Then another, and another, forming a trail. Chris frowned, because it wasn't there yesterday, and it wasn't official trail marking. Somebody placed them recently, leading deeper into the woods. Not towards civilization, but away from it. The 3 friends stood there staring. Then Brandon noticed something. Written on one piece of cloth in black marker was his name. Just Brandon. Nothing else. The 3 immediately turned around and started moving faster. No discussion, no debate. Just go. About 20 minutes later, they heard movement behind them. Branches snapping, footsteps, multiple. Not one person. Several. Keeping pace, not rushing, following. The friends practically jogged the rest of the way. When they finally reached the trailhead parking lot, all 3 felt relief hit immediately. Safety. People. Civilization. Then Brandon looked back toward the tree line and saw him. The old man, standing just inside the forest, smiling, watching. Beside him stood 2 other men, all 3 completely still. None of them crossed into the parking lot. None of them approached. They just watched, as if disappointed. Then slowly disappeared back into the trees. Police searched the area later. They found no campsite, no sign of the man, no explanation for the cloth markers. Nothing. But one ranger told Brandon something before they left. Apparently, there had been reports over the years of campers hearing voices or finding objects moved. seeing people watching from tree lines, but nothing that could ever be proven. Just enough reports to make locals avoid certain sections of the forest. Brandon never returned. Neither did Chris or Matt. Because years later, the thing they still talk about isn't the knife, or the footsteps, or the strange trail markers. It was hearing a stranger whisper Brandon's name outside a tent in the middle of the night. Because none of them ever figured out how he learned it. And none of them really want to know.